Hey, y'all, what's up? Welcome to the latest and greatest episode of Dads in the Class podcast. Of course, you know me, I'm your host, Dion the Glad Dad. And this is the podcast where we talk about fatherhood engagement in education. And we talk about how fathers can be engaged in the lives of their kids, but also just dive a little bit deeper and talk about engagement into the education of their kids. This is episode 9 of the podcast. Got a real great brother on the show with me today, Dr. J.L. Adolph. He is a professor, a hip hop connoisseur, and like myself, he finds a way to weave hip hop into fatherhood and kind of mesh those two worlds and kind of work with folks about the importance of both of those things and how they can be combined and how they can be used together. So, Dr. Adolph, welcome to the show, sir. Glad to have you here.
Yo, happy to be here. Loving the dad in the class. All right, this
Yeah,
is
man.
dope.
Yeah, man, and you had been instrumental in one of the episodes a couple of weeks back. You were commenting. I was like, man, I got to get this brother on the show because he's so passionate about hip hop and so passionate about fatherhood, and of course your work with Dad Cypher. So we'll get into all of that. But just glad to have you here, man. So let's talk a little bit about your work and the work that you're doing and how you were inspired to create Dad Cypher. So tell us what Dad Cypher is and how it aims to kind of support dads.
Okay, so Dad Cypher, basically, it started out as a way for me to connect with my younger twin. So I'm a father of four. So
Mhm.
and so my youngest had different tastes in terms of hip hop culture and that sort of thing. So Dad Cypher, for the most part, was me really trying to decipher or really look at the different kinds of lyricism that they were listening to, the music and that sort of thing. And it was a way for me to develop a deeper conversation and a deeper connection with my boys around hip hop. But later it morphed into what I do as an English professor. It turned into a sort of hip hop therapeutic writing program. And what that entailed was for me to help dads as well as students to really use writing and hip hop to sort of explore fatherhood wounds and that sort of thing as a way of healing, to boost emotional intelligence, and to promote career readiness and that sort of thing. So I found a way to weave that into my everyday profession. So I would say my whole entire life has been as a hip hop head, breaking the silos in education. So I find use hip hop to break silos with history, with education, with sociology, psychology, and I try to put that in to educate the masses.
That's good. Now you talked about your work in higher ed, but let's kind of dive a little bit deeper in because you are an English professor, correct?
Correct. Yes, at Georgia
And
State University.
Georgia State University, and also you do a lot of work in the African diaspora studies, which is very unique, and I think that's very dope. How has that background in academia shaped the mission and the approach of Dad Cypher?
It has shaped it tremendously because hip hop, in many ways, is the latest incarnation of black music, which it derives from the motherland. And in particular, when I think about hip hop culture, for the most part, it embodies the griot traditions, which are the poet historians. So each in various African communities, they had these poet historians that would, give the genealogy, inspire the people to do great things. And it was a way of marking history. And what I found is that Africans during the transatlantic slave trade brought a lot of those storytelling retentions with them. And it influenced the black preacher, the blues man, the jazz man, and now the latest, the MC. So it's really bringing this whole idea of storytelling, but it's beyond storytelling. It's storytelling to inspire people from a spiritual and psychological standpoint to heal and to move forward with and to move forward to doing some form of movement or activism.
That's good. Now, your dissertation was about the connection between hip hop and fatherhood, correct? Like
Correct. Yeah.
fatherhood narratives and hip hop lyricism.
Correct.
Talk a little bit about how those narratives kind of influence fatherhood a little bit.
Yeah. So hip hop has always had this sort of relationship when it comes to fatherhood. So my dissertation work, which the dissertation is entitled DJ Drop That Dead Beat. In other words, like it's a double entendre. Let's drop that sort of stereotype where we critique black men as deadbeats, and let's really look at the stories that are in hip hop culture about urban fatherhood. So hip hop is, if you want to know about urban fatherhood, keep in mind that African Americans are not a monolithic group. So with that being said, but if you want to know about post civil rights and what it was like from the 80s moving forward in terms of black fatherhood, you can find that in hip hop lyricism. From the very first song, like Sugar Hill Gang, The Message. It was one of the very first songs that really even talked about fatherhood. Sugar Hill Gang, when they were talking about Rapper's Delight. That was one of the earliest one. And then the father and son dialogue, The Message. And then hip hop really had a sort of relationship where from the 90s on to early 2000s, it was a sort of weird time in terms of hip hop and the way it depicted black fatherhood. For the most part, it depicted us as abusers, abandoners, and that sort of thing. However, as the art form has grown and MCs have moved from the stage of being teens and adolescents into becoming fathers themselves, what you find in hip hop culture is a really complex view of what it means to be a dad. So they talk about, being a dad and, in poverty, being a dad that's dealing with negative co-parenting situations, being a dad that is also, dealing with, court systems and that sort of thing, but also being a dad and just being proud of having children, being present in their life. And so I would say, hip hop, one thing that I would say, give it credit for, they have made this whole idea of quote unquote being a deadbeat. They made that a pariah in our communities. That is not cool. It is considered whack. And I think hip hop has changed it and made it cool for black men to identify themselves as fathers. So.
Yeah, I think even when you go back to, Edo G and the Bulldogs, Be a Father to Your Child, when you listen to Naughty by Nature's Everything's Gonna Be All Right, when Tretch says, I never knew my dad, up into, Beanie Siegel has some songs about his father. He and Jay-Z have songs about their father. Scarface has some records about their fathers and the impact that not having their fathers played in their lives. And I think those are great stories, but you also get to see the side of it when you have Will Smith, where he says, just the two of us, right?
Correct.
Or Jay-Z, when he had the song where he's rapping about Blue Ivy, when she was a baby and things like that. So over the years, I think as hip hop has matured, we've kind of seen the narratives around fatherhood mature, because now we are seeing the artists talking about how cool it is for them to be fathers and promoting the message of responsible fatherhood and how it is important to them to be a part of their kids' lives. Like even when you watch, I'm not sure if you've seen the Beyonce movie, the Renaissance tour movie. I saw that, and there's a couple of scenes where Blue and Jay are just really bonding, but you get to see Jay bonding with the other two kids also. So I think, that narrative of being a father and being present it's been a prevalent theme throughout hip hop. How do you feel hip hop contributes to kind of shaping those perspectives of fatherhood? And are there any recurring themes or messages that you see?
Well, you know what? I think hip hop, for the most part, has really shaped it in terms of fathers being just present. Outside of the lyricism, that it was a lot of cinematography of black men as fathers in hip hop. When I go back to early the '90s hood flicks with Boys in the Hood, and we saw Lawrence Fishburne, I would probably say he definitely represents what I would consider a hip hop father and that sort of thing in that '80s, '90s time period, trying to raise young Trey. But then if we look at the reality shows, we have Reverend Run, who had his fatherhood show. You had Snoop Dogg, T.I. And what you have found is black males are saying that it is very important and vital that they portray fatherhood as not an auxiliary piece, but as a foundational piece, to what it means to be a parent. It's not extra. They're
Mhm.
saying that, hey, we are foundational blocks to the raising of our child. And I would probably say the recurring themes are really that I find in a lot of lyricism is really railing against the dominant narrative that still portrays us as stereotypically not being there. That is often presented in a lot of hip hop songs. A lot of really trying to portray fatherhood as not a negotiated space. That it's not the mother child relationship does not trump the father child relationship. And it's a real what I find in a lot of the themes is this sort of fight for in a sense of sort of equality when it comes to the way of child rearing and that sort of thing. But
Mhm.
also I would say hip hop, one of the things that this genre does is really talk about anxieties and traumas associated with being a dad and how to overcome those. So I would say those are just some of the many themes that you'll find in the hip hop lyricism, fatherhood narratives.
Mhm. Mhm. Now, you said you are a father of four. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, a father of four.
Father of four. How have you used hip hop when it comes to being engaged with your kids and their education?
Oh, when it comes to the education, it's funny because hip hop is definitely a part of poetry. I mean, hip hop is poetry. I mean,
Mhm.
we use the same figurative language, we use metaphor, we use simile, we use tone, we use all of those things. So, as an English professor, it was very important that when I, would read to my kids and that sort of thing, that we always, I always tried to find books that had rhyme schemes. I remember my daughter, we would read Queen Latifah, Queen of the Scene, and it was like her breaking down hip hop lyrics and gender. Breaking gender stereotypes or talking about this young girl that wanted to be a basketball player. And then I would probably say, with my children, it really helped a lot with emotional intelligence because hip hop does have misogyny and that sort of thing. It was important that I use those elements of the culture to really help to challenge some of, the gender misogynistic stereotypes that sometimes that are projected in the culture on black women. So I would use the lyrics as a sort of case study to talk about different subject matters, whether it be sex or drugs and that sort of thing. We really would just sit down, examine the lyrics, and just use that as a way to have discussion.
Mm, mm. As someone who, as we celebrate 50 years of hip hop this year, as someone who, like me, has been, engaged in a part of the culture for probably your whole life, I would assume. I fell in love with
Mhm.
hip hop when I was 7 years old. I'm in my early 40s now. Um, what's your take on? where the culture is now as opposed to where it was, 20, 25 years ago?
You know what? My take on it is that the industry has really had a strong level of control as to the diversity of messaging in hip hop. Growing up in the 80s, 90s, where it was less industry control, you can hear a whole variety of different types of hip hop. Like for me, I was inspired by everything from Public Enemy to KRS-One. I learned a lot about Black consciousness. Through NWA, I learned a lot about police brutality. Through A Tribe Called Quest, I learned a lot about like the consequences of date rape and different ways of being Black. And I think right now, the issue is it's not that we don't really have a variety of voices. It's just that those voices are not really getting the same airplay, because for every Sexy Red we have a Rhapsody, or we have a Chica, or and it's a slew of underground artists that are out there that are doing some amazing work. However, it is hard to break into having these different messages hit mainstream.
Mhm.
So I would say that's the major difference I would see. I think it's an absence of diversity, and that's kind of sad.
Yeah, and as someone who worked in radio for 20 years, I tell people that, the quality content, it's not that it's not there. What what I think people are missing, and I think what people want to say, but they don't always know how to say it, is that it's the balance that's not there, right? Because
Yeah,
in the 90s, there was a Queen Latifah, but there was also a Lil Kim. There was a Public Enemy, but there was also Uncle Luke, right? And the balance was there, so you could hear more of that. But now it's just like you have to search for what you want. Like I'll tell anybody, Rhapsody is the greatest MC on the planet, male or female,
hmm,
right? And that's because I listen to her, and when she drops new music, I find it, and you know what I mean. All those things, but you may have to do a little bit more work. Yes, Sexy Red is played more on the radio. Yes, Lotto is played a little bit more on the radio. But also you have options to stream what you want to listen to. Like you have Apple Music, you have Tidal, you have Spotify, to find the music um, that you're looking for. So sometimes you got to kind of get out of that bubble of thinking that the radio is going to save you, and just go out there and find what you're looking for. Um,
I strongly
do
agree with you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think with hip hop, I wanna talk about how we can leverage it. How do you think we can leverage hip hop specifically for uh, fatherhood and father engagement?
Well, I think you know what, working. So I'm in Atlanta, and I work with this consortium called Fathers Matter ATL.
Hmm.
And what it is a collective group of like 7 different strategies where we talk about policy, mass incarceration, and that sort of thing. I think the way that to answer your question, I think the way that we get more hip hop involved is we really have to look at we have to go back to the past and look at the way that the Black arts movement was the sister organization to the Black Power movement of the
Mm,
1960s. Hip hop is simply the messenger, and that sort of thing. However, no message is complete if we do not have a sort of political piece that's moving that. And so with grassroots organizations like Fathers Matter ATL, what it does is it starts really looking at policy. It starts looking at improving child relationships, mental health, education, changing all of those things. And then the music itself should function as a sort of mouthpiece to spread the word to the masses and that sort of
mhm.
thing. So I think to answer your question, we really have to link hip hop as much as we can to our worlds of education, to our worlds of policy making, because it speaks the language of young people. And
Mhm.
so if we really talk about trying to connect and engage young people, we have to use the instruments that can reach them.
Yeah. Are there any specific strategies that you all use at Dad Cypher to increase fatherhood engagement?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I have done, really as a professor, I have some of the pieces of Dad Cypher are integrated into my classroom work as an English professor. So one of the things that I do in my class is called College to Career. And so, in that particular class, what I do is have students to really look at hip hop fatherhood narratives. And then I challenge them to look at their own upbringing. And I challenge them to put their upbringing in rhyme form and look at how their experiences with their father may have shaped their family work scripts or may have shaped their sort of career development. And so I look at that and we look at the positive and negative associated with those fathered experiences. And then we look at how do we, sort of, write this information out, get this sort of trauma out on the page. And then we look at ways in which we can boost the emotional intelligence of the kids so that they can then turn these stories into transformational stories that can get them on attention, that can get them attention on like social media, such as LinkedIn, to get attract future employers and that sort of thing to that story. So one of
Mm,
the very strategies is really just really doing some sort of therapeutic writing. So I use a lot of therapeutic narrative writing techniques to do that. Although my background is not therapy, and I want that known, but I really use this sort of writing as a way of therapeutically, like really laying down those experiences and looking at areas where we can grow.
yeah, I had a good friend of mine, a great brother, Pizzo Johnson, on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he is down in Atlanta, and he has a program called Pain on Paper, where he does something similar, that social emotional learning work, by helping young folks take that pain and put it on paper and turn it into a poem or turn it into a song or turn it into a story. So it's good to see that. Speaking of that, how do you think we can kind of leverage hip hop to, again, speak to what you just said, but to increase social emotional learning within the classroom?
I think we have to become more creative. I would say one of the things that hip hop, the thing that's so beautiful about the culture, in addition to it being a multi-billion-dollar business, it's also a multimedia business. So hip hop
Mhm.
involves like video production and that sort of thing. And I would say personally, as someone who is engaged in literacy and the teaching of writing with young people, I would say we can use like I do in my classroom what's called digital narratives, where not only do students write out projects, but they have to create some sort of visual rhetoric in the forms of making a video to enhance their storytelling abilities. And then they
Mm,
found out that it added another layer to the emotions that they're trying to convey. And we're in an industry now, we're in a time period where everyone will have to learn how to do some form of digital presentation for various work activities. So that's one of the ways that we do that. I also do audio essays and have students to sometimes do a sort of podcast,
mhm,
sort of
mhm.
writing. So, in a sense, it's sort of media training. Most of all, though, is I would say we can engage or increase that in teaching our young people that when they are in school, they are a brand. So, how do you want to market yourself as a future employee or as a future entrepreneur? How do you want to market that? And so, in hip hop, it's all about the marketing and getting the word out. And that goes back to graffiti culture. And,
Mm.
I take those same elements and I try to prepare them, for the future workforce that they plan on going into.
That's good. On a personal level, as someone who is working in academia and also working in advocacy, how do you find space within yourself to balance those two?
It's a challenge from time to time. I mean, of course, right now, my production and my advocacy has slowed down around this time of the year because right now I'm currently grading finals.
Hmm.
But what I try to do for the most part is I try to weave my advocacy into service learning projects for my students. So in a sense, I use my classroom as a sort of yet another sort of outlet to introduce the students to service learning, introduce them to video production. And in a sense, that becomes a form of my advocacy. And then I just try as much as I can to go out and do keynote speaking events and try to educate other educators. Right now, maybe uh, if the Lord say the same, I'll be presenting at the Elect project, which is in Pennsylvania, and it's a group of educators that are working with pregnant teens and parenting teens. And
Mm,
I'm actually using some of those hip hop strategies to help these young people to transform their stories of struggle into resilience so that they could show that they have grit, which is one of the key things that major industry people are looking for in various jobs industry employees who can have grit and resilience when it comes to the workplace.
that's good. From your perspective, what relationship does education have with fatherhood?
I think, well, you know what? I would probably say historically it hasn't been a good one.
Mm,
So right now, I think we really have to work on implementing more father-friendly practices when it comes to the relationship between educators and our young people. Unfortunately, the stereotype for years, and this is beyond just men of color. I mean, I think it impacts all fathers. Fathers via media and that sort of thing has been depicted as someone who's not really engaged with their children.
mhm,
Sort of, you get that sort of Peter Griffin or sort of Homer Simpson sort of
mhm,
depiction of what it means to be a father. And oftentimes, what you'll find is sometimes educators will not or sort of resistant to engaging with fathers when it comes to the relation when it comes to their children. And so oftentimes it's just like, well, let me talk to the mom and to make sure this like that the child is demonstrating emotional intelligence, doing the projects, doing the work. It's a brilliant book out there called Fathering in the Margins. And
mm,
in that particular book, it talks about, it gives a real detailed account on how much educators are very resistant to engaging in dialogue with fathers because the perceived stereotype is that they're absentee or they're just not engaged with their children.
mhm,
So I
mhm,
would probably say we really have to work on developing stronger bonds with
mm.
dad.
Mm. And as we look forward in a world that is going to be, I'll say, I'm not going to say overcome with AI, but in a world that will be full of AI, what does the outlook for you look like for academia, artificial intelligence, fatherhood, and kind of as we see all of these worlds eventually, and hip hop, as we see all of these worlds eventually meshing in some way, shape, or form. What does that world look like for you?
Well, I would say this, and it has caused a big scare in academia, the use of AI, because for some reason, some educators believe it may be used to replace them, or
Mhm,
some educators will say, well, it's going to lead to academic high levels of academic dishonesty. And I would say the technology has always been perceived as a threat to the world of education. However, I embrace this challenge because with AI in particular, I would say we can. This is another way that students can use this to critique their own writing. Because really, when you think about AI, it's not going to create quote unquote real detailed research quality essays. You're going to have to demonstrate some original thought and ideas because basically it's going to mass produce. It's basically a language, a database system that sort of
Hmm.
mass produces the same sort of thing. So teachers, after a while, will be able to pick on, oh, this is AI. But what you
Hmm.
can do is have students to write original work and then use AI as a space to say, well, could you point out the weaknesses of my argument? Or could you point out areas that I can improve this essay? And so,
Hmm.
in a sense, it becomes yet another electronic sort of teacher that may reinforce what the educators are trying to teach, like making sure that you add balance to your argument, counter argument. Do you have enough historical backgrounds? So I would probably say in the world of AI, if we really embrace it and tell students that it's not a replacement for your original ideas, but it can just help you to enhance. In many ways, like I remember, I'm old enough to remember when some classrooms in math didn't want to allow calculators.
Hmm.
Now
Hmm.
calculators are just a constant stay in those things. I don't think it takes away because you still have to know how these things operate.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Hmm.
And besides, writing is communication. So
Right.
you can try to use as much AI as you want, but if you cannot conduct a conversation, it's not going to help you. So
Right. Right. So for the dads out there who might be struggling to um, connect, the dads who are striving to strengthen their bonds with their children, what is one key piece of advice that you would give them?
well, the one key piece of advice is I would say become media literate. You
Hmm.
can, with the world of social media, with and these kids have phones that give them access to tons of information. It is essential that dads become media literate. It's
Hmm.
important that they dad cipher or decipher what's going on in their kids' lives. So that means sitting down, looking at the lyricism, sitting down, looking at the images they're seeing, and really you not running away from it, but really using these as teachable moments to really talk to your kids. And I think that is something that would be helpful. um, Kids, especially at Generation Z, are learning a lot of information very fast, some things that they may not understand. And if we just come at a space of judgment, they'll shut down. So we
Hmm.
really need to come into a sense of partnership and really have these deep, meaningful, difficult conversations. And that way we can kind of help them to process what they're seeing. So I would
Hmm.
say, my piece of advice is become as media literate as you can. Learn to speak Generation Z. It's going to be essential.
Yeah, that's good. Now, as we close out, I'll just ask, what is your uh, vision for the future of Dad Cypher? What does it look like in a perfect world to you going forward?
Well, in a perfect world for me, I would like to see that Cypher grow to a space where it becomes a space to educate other educators and other fatherhood practices so that we can develop core curriculum and that sort of thing to show how we could use hip hop literacy to promote fatherhood, to promote literacy, to promote career awareness. Currently, right now, I am working on a book, and really that's transforming my dissertation work into one that's a little more accessible for the general audience.
Hmm.
So Dad Cypher very soon will be in book format, so we can take some of those lessons, look at some of this lyricism, and see how we can use that as teachable moments to help fathers to address substance abuse, various traumas, negative co-parenting, and I think this will be a central component to gaining a deeper understanding of what it means to be a Black male as well as a father in America.
Good. I can't let you go without asking this one question. I have a feeling I know what your answer is going to be, but album of the year for 2023 was blank.
Ooh,
Hip hop album of the year. Hip hop album of the year.
Hip hop album of this year, Killer Mike.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. I knew you. That seems to be the consensus. I am of a different thought. I believe that Nas and Hit Boy's Magic 2 was a better project. But I can't find a lot of people who will agree with that. So
Nas is my favorite MC of all time. He's in my top 5. He's my number 1 in my top 5. So of course he's the guy. But I did love the Michael album. Maybe it's because I'm living in the A right now.
Listen, I knew the answer to the question before I even asked it, man. I didn't even. I just wanted to see. So, Dr. Adolph, let folks know how they can find you, your socials, and all that good stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, once again, this is Dr. J.L. Adolph, better known as the extra large professor of Dad Cypher. You can find me on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I don't mess around with Snapchat. I'm gonna say that one for the Zoomers, but for everything else, you can hit me up on there. And
what about TikTok? What about TikTok?
Oh yeah, I'm on TikTok too. So I'm on TikTok.
Okay.
Yeah, I just don't do Snapchat.
Okay. I think the Snapchat wave kind of died down. I think we might be cool on that. I think we might be cool on Snapchat. But thank you for joining the show, sir. Yeah, thank you for joining the show, man. It has been a pleasure. Looking forward to just seeing great things from you. Maybe sometime we can collaborate. If you ever need me for anything, just feel free to reach out. But glad to have you here, great brother. If you're listening to the podcast, if you're watching the podcast, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Dads in the Class podcast, the number 1 podcast for fathers and father engagement, and telling you how you can get engaged and stay engaged, and the importance of engaging in your kids' education. We'll holler at y'all on the next episode, y'all. Peace.
All right, peace.